Tires screech as a drunk couple realizes a young girl is heading down the middle of the road with blood covering her from the neck down. In her left hand, she's gripping a knife, while in her right hand, a puddle of blood is running down the floor of which she's currently walking. Panic fills the vehicle filled with the young couple who's witnessing such a mortifying sight. The young girl is gazing directly at them as she freezes in her current position. She's calm, but how can this young innocent appearing child be so calm when she looks like she just butchered an elephant? She's not blinking at all, as her focus is just locked in on the young teenage couple who's still panicking as they observe the young girl. "What do you think I should do?" asks Philip as he turns over his attention to his girlfriend Stacy. Stacy, with a pale blank expression on her face, just sat there like a statue with her attention still locked on the young girl. "Stacy, do you hear me?" Philip cried out aloud, yanking Stacy's attention from the young girl and placing it back onto himself. "What, Philip?" Stacy yelled. Philip grinned. "What should I do?" he asked nervously. Stacy glimpsed at him before staring back over at the blood-covered young girl. "Put the car in drive and get us the hell out of here," she replied frantically. "What are you waiting for?" She can see her boyfriend's nervousness on full display. Sweat is running down his forehead as well as his palms. He's shaking like a child witnessing their biggest fear standing right in front of them. "Philip, go. Do you hear me? Get us the hell out of here," she insisted. Her words flew in his ears and went out without him flinching, as if he didn't hear her speak. "Philip, get us out of here now," she added. She shoved him violently, over and over again, finally knocking a little sense in him as the young girl gradually began approaching their vehicle with the knife still wrapped firmly in her hand. Stacy's eyes began to water as though she could sense what was getting ready to take place. "Philip, what are you waiting for?" she exclaimed. Her words aren't appearing to get through to her boyfriend, which caused her to strike him on the right cheek with her open right palm. All of his senses seemed to return right back to him, causing him to place the vehicle into drive as he noticed the young girl getting closer and closer to his car. He threw his foot on the gas pedal, immediately launching the car in the direction of the young girl. Stacy watched in horror briefly before slamming her eyes closed as she was bracing for the vehicle to collide into the young girl. "I can't do it," yelled Philip, whose heart beated through his chest as he slammed on his car brakes, causing his vehicle to stop just inches before the young girl, who didn't seem shaken or bothered at all about almost being ran over by a vehicle. Stacy's eyes opened widely as she locked her attention onto the young girl, who glimpsed at her momentarily before looking over at Philip. Tears began streaming down her eyes as she closed them for a second. "Where's my mommy?" says the young girl. "Where's my daddy?" she continued as she took a look at her hand holding the knife. Philip grabbed onto the door handle, causing Stacy to grab his wrist. "Philip, what are you doing?" she asked in panic. "We can't trust this little girl." Philip's eyes widened. He can see the fear in his girlfriend's eyes. She's in a full state of shock and panic. She's in fear for their safety, but deep down inside, Philip isn't. "Do you hear yourself? It's a little girl," he responded. "She probably found her parents dead or someone may have tried to hurt her, so she defended herself." Stacy's jaw dropped. She's stunned. She's in awe by her boyfriend's words. She just doesn't get it. "Philip, do you hear yourself?" she says. "This girl isn't innocent. She's evil. She's one of those evil kids we read about in the papers." Philip giggled. "First of all, no one reads the newspapers anymore," he replied sarcastically. Secondly, this girl needs our help. The tears running down the young girl's eyes is melting his heart. He's at a loss for words as he removes his girlfriend's hand from his wrist to allow him to open up the car door as the young girl approaches the side of the vehicle, still with the knife in hand. "Are you okay?" he asks as his girlfriend attempted to slam his car door shut, but was unsuccessful in doing so. "Stacy, stop," he shouted. "Relax, okay? Someone must have hurt this little girl," he insisted. "Where's my mommy? And where's my daddy?" asked the young girl. Her face displays confusion. "Clearly, she must be lost," says Philip, attempting to ease his girlfriend's mind. Stacy had a few shots of liquor earlier, however her mind isn't clouded. She can think clearly. She knows that something is wrong, and the root of the wrong lies within the young girl standing next to her boyfriend's vehicle. "Philip, let's get out of here. Let's go," she said in an almost defeated tone, her eyes dripping tears. Her heart is pounding. She just can't comprehend why they're in this predicament in the first place. Philip took a look into her eyes. His charm is what captured her heart since the very second they met. He stole her heart and he's held it hostage ever since. His smirk brought a calmness over her, which made her suddenly believe that everything was going to be just fine. He leaned in to give her a kiss on the lips. "We're going to help this little girl out. Then I'm going to do what I do and help you out," he says playfully. Stacy smiled from ear to ear as their lips met just over the gear stick of his vehicle. Stacy closed her eyes as their tongues collided non-stop, just before she could feel all of Phyllis' weight fall over onto her. Her eyes opened wide enough to almost cause her eyes to roll out of her head. "I love you," says Philip, who struggled to utter those words. All of Phyllis' weight leaned onto Stacy, causing her to struggle to stay upright as she was filled with fright while she took a look into the eyes of the young girl, who began smiling joyously as Phyllis' blood stained every inch of Stacy. "My parents, where are they?" asked the young girl as she pulled the knife from out of Phyllis' back. Stacy shrugged her shoulders as she nervously responded, "I don't know." The young girl grabbed Philip by the neck before pulling him out of the vehicle. "They're gone," she says. "They're in hell where they belong, just like your boyfriend, and soon, just like you will be." Stacy screamed in a state of shock. She can't move an inch. Her body is numbed with fear. The young girl with the razor-sharp knife leaned in. "You know what?" she asked rhetorically. "I killed my parents, and I killed my older brother too, and our neighbors. And you know what? I'm just getting started." Before Stacy could free the fear from out of her system, the young girl jammed the knife in hand into the throat of Stacy, whose eyes stayed wide open while pounds of blood spilled from her neck. The young girl examined Stacy, whose eyes remained open until her soul escaped from her body moments later. On this night, Friday the 13th, was the night the young, innocent, sweet girl became deadly Gabriela. Nothing but red and blue lights fill the dark, empty road, otherwise known as Route 666. The small town of Ophelia, Virginia, will never be the same after this night. Young Gabriela is resting on the back passenger seat, curled up in a ball as she constantly cries out, "They stole me from my parents." Gabriela can't be consoled after officer attempts to comfort her with their words. She just won't allow anyone to place a finger on her, as nervousness and panicness sets in non-stop. "Get away from me," she continuously cried out. "I want my mommy and daddy. Where's my mommy and daddy?" Kicking and screaming was all Gabriela did from the moment the police arrived just minutes after she gutted Stacy in the neck. To be just 12 years of age, Gabriela is clever and quick on her toes. She's always thinking. She knows for certain being tense as the head of everyone else is a necessity, and it's a quality she picked up from her mother. Her conniving, heartless ways are the qualities that's transformed Gabriela into whom she is today. Her parents never loved her. She was an accident child. She wasn't supposed to be born. A failed abortion along with a failed Plan B attempt are the two main reasons Gabriela is alive today. Flashbacks of the moments her mother made known to her that she swallowed pills in order to prevent her from even being born haunts her thoughts as she relives the moments of her executing her parents. Gabriela has spent her entire life hearing her parents tell her they wish that she died at birth or was never born. She's an expense that they wish never existed. How does Gabriela know this? Because she's been told this her whole life. Rewind to 8 a.m. this morning. At the dining room table, sitting alone, was Gabriela. A bowl flooded with cereal and a very little milk sat before Gabriela atop of a wooden table. All alone in a rundown house is the norm for young Gabriela, and has been basically from the very moment she's been born. Cops have been called to her home more than a dozen times due to her parents leaving her home alone. Child Services has been involved several of those times. However, never once was she taken away from her parents. And that may have plenty to do with the fact that her father is a former Marine. He's a decorated Marine who served his country for more than 3 decades. In the town of Ophelia, military veterans are worshipped. And that's the main reason why Gabriela's father, Gabriel, hasn't ever been arrested, despite his strong armed robbery criminal ways. He has PTSD. He's had flashbacks of his time during battle, of which he's ended a few lives to protect both himself along with his fellow Marines. His past haunts his thoughts non-stop. It's been the reason why he's verbally exploded constantly and rapidly on both his wife, Sandra, along with Gabriela. Tattoos are spilled all over his arms and legs, along with knife scars on both of his wrists after several failed suicide attempts. Once he slit his wrist in front of Gabriela, all because he was mentally exhausted over her presence, which he informed her just before he dug the sharp blade into his wrist. Gabriela watched in horror, but ensured pleasure, as her father tumbled down to the ground moments after ounces of blood flew from out of his wrist. After he sliced it wide open, it all happened during dinner time. Gabriela observed the blood covering her father, inch by inch, as the blood escaped from his wrist at a rapid rate. Gabriela didn't flinch a bit. She didn't panic at all. Neither did she cry out to her mother for help. She just continued munching on her lasagna, enjoying it as she watched in excitement as her father's soul slowly attempted to escape from his body. Gabriela watched on, hoping to witness death for the first time, something she's heard about on a nightly basis because her parents were always watching the evening news. This was going to be the first time she witnessed death. However, her plans were spoiled Just seconds before half of her father's blood painted the kitchen floor, Gabriela's mother Sandra entered the kitchen from the bedroom with her cell phone glued to her ear as usual as she gossiped away with one of her many friends. Home is where she spent most of her days when she wasn't at work, and not because she wanted to. It's all because, as she always put it, Gabriela's fault. The child she's never wanted but had is the reason she spends most of her days stuck in her home. It's made her miserable over the years, and she blames both her husband, especially Gabriela, for ruining her once party lifestyle. Her and her husband barely lay in the same bed together. Although she loves him dearly, she despises him greatly. However, entering into the kitchen on that night and immediately observing her husband laid out on the floor passed out caused her heart to pause. In a split second, she looked over and spotted her daughter smiling sinisterly from ear to ear. Gabriela clearly wanted her father dead, and that set off Sandra, who rushed over to the kitchen counter to grab a roll of paper towels along with several dishcloths. She threw herself in the direction of her husband, who rested in the center of the kitchen, appearing lifeless. "Gabriela, help me," Sandra yelled aloud. "Get over here now and help me save your father." Gabriela sat there before turning to face her mother. No words poured out of her mouth. No sympathy was displayed on Gabriela's face as she's witnessing her father gradually losing his life. Gabriela listened as her mother begged her to help her out, but she didn't budge. A minute flew by, then another, as Gabriela continued hearing her mother bawl out for her aid. However, Gabriela refused to lift even a finger to assist her father. "Gabriela, help me save your father," Sandra exclaimed. Gabriela froze for seconds before shaking her head. "Let him die, mother. He deserves to die," says Gabriela with no compassion. Her mother's eyes widened in shock. "I raised a monster, an evil witch," says Sandra in a state of panic. Gabriela giggled. "That's funny, Mom, seeing as I came from an evil witch." Gabriela replied, still with an evil grin stuck on her face. Gabriela prayed for her father's death on that night. However, her evil prayers weren't answered. The medics arrived just in time, and Sandra's love and devotion for Gabriel elevated to an all-time high on that night, bringing them closer together and growing their love more than ever before. Fast forward to this blazing hot morning where Gabriela is sitting at the dining room table all alone like normal. Neither of her parents has spoken to her since that almost fatal night of her father's terrible near death. They still yell and scream at Gabriela, but as far as conversations, even to see if their daughter is doing fine, they refuse to do so. Gabriela's been fine with it ever since, which disturbs her parents, who finally decided on what needs to be done to end their biggest headache once and for all. So as Gabriela continued chowing down on her breakfast, all alone like usual, soon after in the dining room entered the two of her parents who could hardly look her in the eyes. No words were spoken while her parents took their seats at the same dining table with no meals resting on the table before them. Gabriela continued eating, completely ignoring her parents' presence. "I wish you were never born," shouted Sandra as both the parents turned their attentions towards their sinister child. Gabriela continued aiming her attention straight ahead at the colorful wallpaper her grandmother had thrown up decades ago. "I hate you both," says Gabriela, causing her parents to snicker. "As much as you hate me being your daughter, I hate you too even being my parents," she added straightforwardly. "As far as I'm concerned, you two aren't my parents. Never was, and you two never will be." Gabriela kicked her chair back away from the dining table, allowing her to stand up from her seat. She grabbed her now empty bowl from off of the table and slowly walked over to the kitchen sink. "Young lady, come back here now," shouted Gabriel. You've been my biggest regret since your first breath on this earth. I despise you in every way. Now I want you to come back here at once, young lady. Gabriela failed to obey her father's demands as she slammed her bowl into the kitchen sink, causing it to shatter all over the place. Ah, she screamed aloud. I hate you. I hate you both. The 12 years of being mistreated has built up and pent up anger that Gabriela is unleashing all at this time. Her anger is evident, however, it's not throwing off her focus at all as she spotted a 12-inch razor-sharp knife resting on the countertop just a couple of feet away from her. Her eyes glistened as she was injected with glee. Loud screeching sounded off as her father stood up from the seat to turn towards his daughter, who kept her back facing him as her father continued launching his anger towards his daughter. We're getting rid of you once and for all, he shouted. Gabriela looked over at him over her shoulder, rolling her eyes over and over again, just so her father could witness her blatant disrespect towards him. Shipping you to boarding school won't do you any good, he shouted. It's time we get rid of you once and for all. He didn't let another second travel by before he marched over in his daughter's direction. Each step he took caused a gigantic thud, one after the other. He's fueling with rage, and it's all because of Gabriela, who's breathing heavily as her heart races. With every step her father takes, she can't measure just how far he is from her at this time. She knows he's stronger, faster, and more powerful than she will ever be. Therefore, she must react to her father faster than he can to her, which caused her to immediately dash at full speed in his direction. Both of her hands are wrapped around the knife as she rushes in his direction. Her immediate action has thrown her father off completely as she shoves the knife right into his gut, causing him to belch out in a painful cry. If that weren't enough, a stone-cold expression painted Gabriela's face as she watched her father drop down to his knees. Not a drip of empathy was displayed by Gabriela, who yanked the knife from out of his gut and shoved it into his chest repeatedly as she could hear her mother beg her to stop. Gabriela didn't stop. In fact, she kept going, causing more than 30 stab wounds into her father's system before her sights were aimed directly at her mother. You're not gonna get rid of me, mother. If you could, you would have years ago, says Gabriela. I'm getting rid of you, mother. Sandra, shaking with terror, attempted to dash away from her daughter. However, her fear for her own safety caused her not to pay attention to anything going on around her. That caused her to run right into her father's grandfather clock on the opposite end of the room. She wasn't paying any attention to what rested before her because she was too busy paying attention to the evil miscreant rushing in her direction. Sandra's focus went blank momentarily before she woke up, resting on her back, looking directly up at Gabriela towering over her. Her mother, filled with fear, watched in disbelief while her own daughter dangled a knife over her. Sandra slid away from Gabriela an inch, only to watch her daughter move slowly along with her. I'm looking at the devil when I look at you, Gabriela, her mother says. I knew you were unholy from the moment you were conceived. Everyone told me to get rid of you, even your own brother. Our neighbors fear you. It's your own aura, your mere presence that's ingested with evil. You won't get away with this, deadly Gabriela. Gabriela grinned. Watch me, says Gabriela jokingly. Too bad you won't be able to watch me get away with murder. Gabriela hung the same knife she gutted her father with over her mother for several moments. Then within the blink of an eye, Gabriela inserted the same knife into her mother twice as many times as she did her father. Now back to the present moment. Gabriela stood kicking and screaming on the backseat of the young couple's car she's just murdered. In the cop's eyes, it's a young girl who's gone through hell and back. Meanwhile, Gabriela is using this time to think of how she's going to get from out of this situation with her freedom still intact.